Looks like we got some more leopards that are feasting. As this meme says, looks like face is back on the menu. I must say, this is hysterical to me. This is a letter to President-elect Trump from the MENA, that is Middle East and North African American Chamber of Commerce of Dearborn, Michigan, where the U.S. Arab community chose Trump. Please remember that these people chose Trump. Let's look at this letter, y'all. Dear President-elect Trump, on behalf of Lebanese Americans within our MENA American, that's Middle Eastern North African Chamber of Commerce, we congratulate you on your historic return to the White House. Dearborn, Michigan, a city with the highest concentration of Arab Americans outside of the Middle East, turned red in this presidential election due to your genuine outreach to our community and our belief that you are the optimal choice for our democracy, economy, and in matters of foreign policy. The over 3.5 million MENA Americans, some of whom reside in the swing states, are proud to have contributed to your margins of victory, particularly in Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Georgia. Your success is a testament to your resonance with the values and concerns of MENA Americans, because Trump has always just been like so pro Middle Eastern and North African issues. It's just so much that he has said that just shows that he is for these people. In response to your renowned letter addressed to Lebanese Americans dated October 26, 2024, and due to the escalation of Israeli attacks subsequent to the U.S. election, we are urging your administration and transition team to apply your political influence in demanding an immediate ceasefire in Lebanon and Palestine. This aligns to the commitment toward lasting peace, which you made in the letter and in person while signing the peace plaques, because this man is not a total liar in every other thing. You guys really believed that he cared about your issues. You really think that, because he's not a liar or anything. Oh, it says, furthermore, our meetings with your team leading up to your historic win underscored the importance of our dialogue in matters pertaining to Lebanon. These engagements have already led to robust lines of communication, including your recent commitment to pursue peace in Lebanon and your unprecedented and iconic visit. As a matter of high importance and in delivering on your promise of a November 6th ceasefire, again, we urge you to call for an immediate ceasefire in Lebanon and Palestine while crafting a long-lasting peace in the region. Further, we believe your team's leadership will be instrumental in advancing productive U.S.-Lebanese relations, and for that reason, we would also like to add our support to the appointment of a chief negotiator with the Lebanese government. We also want to highlight an equitable and unconditioned ceasefire would serve as a catalyst for all parties to negotiate a lasting peace, as evidenced by historical precedent. Without a ceasefire, diplomacy becomes elusive. We look forward to collaborating with you and your team on implementing an immediate ceasefire. And then he goes and hires Mike Huckabee, who has said that Palestine does not exist, and he has a son-in-law that basically wants to use the Gaza Strip and put some condos for Israeli people. So it's going to be interesting, and these people are quite silly to believe this, to believe Trump. Lozy says, I just don't know what to say. What did they expect? Vinny G says, wait till you see what Huckabee has in store for Gaza and Lebanon. He said, we need to find land elsewhere in the world for the Palestinians, and that the Israelis are not occupiers and the settlements being built are lawful. Hope you're happy, Dearborn suckers. Then we got this man right here. He went on CNN to whine. He's part of the Uncommitted voters. He went on CNN to whine and ask President Biden to negotiate a ceasefire now with Netanyahu. He's whining to Biden, even though these people are responsible for Trump getting into office. And now that they've won and got Trump into office, he is scared because he knows that Trump does not give a gosh darn about his people. And the fact that he hired Mike Huckabee, and Mike Huckabee does not even recognize the Palestinians. These people said no. They said no strongly to Kamala Harris. Now they got what they wanted. They were protesting Kamala Harris's rallies. They voted for Trump. Like the MENA letter said, they overwhelmingly went for Trump. They are going to have to lay in this bed. There's poop all in this bed. There's poop all in this bed. They're going to have to lay in it and get comfy. They're going to have to smell it. This is what you asked for, uncommitted voters that voted for Trump. Ain't no going back to Biden at this particular point, uncommitted leader.
Guy who's going to oversee the final stages of that campaign. And so our message right now is to President Biden, you've got to do something about this. President Biden, stand up for once to Netanyahu before Donald Trump successfully gets away with pinning this legacy of this ethnic cleansing campaign on you and you alone forevermore.
Molly's mom said they seem to think Biden can do anything. It's been obvious for a long time that Netanyahu isn't lifting a finger until Trump is in power. These people didn't think at all. Lisa, Florida teacher, says, why would Netanyahu listen to Joe Biden now when he knows Trump will be president in 2 months anyway? Paula said they had all the smoke last month. They can sit in it. Let me know what you think about this. Somebody said that these leopards are going to be on my 600-pound life, and I certainly think so. Like I said just a minute ago, lots of people pooped in their own beds by voting for Trump, and now they get to get real comfy in those beds and sit and lay and sleep in those beds of poop. You kind of deserve it. I wonder how well this pick for Secretary of Defense is going to be. This former Fox News host says that you got to fire a ton of generals. How well is that going to go over? Across hours of podcast and television interviews, Army veteran and Fox News host Pete Hegseth has articulated his plan for a frontal assault to reform the Department of Defense from the top down, including by purging woke generals, limiting women from some combat roles, eliminating diversity goals, and utilizing the real threat of violence to reassert the United States as a global power. As President-elect Donald Trump's nominee for the Secretary of Defense, Hegseth, 44, could have the chance to implement that vision, commanding the country's more than 1 million active duty soldiers. An infantry officer in the U.S. Army National Guard, Hegseth deployed to Guantanamo Bay, Iraq, and Afghanistan before leaving the service with the rank of major, according to military records. Hegseth has worked for Fox News since 2014, where he co-hosts Fox and Friends Weekend. He's not even on during the week. That's the reason why people don't know him. Once a critic of Trump's foreign policy and military stances during Trump's 2016 campaign, Hegseth grew to become one of Trump's fiercest on-air defenders. Pete is tough, smart, and a true believer in America first. With Pete at the helm, America's enemies are on notice. Our military will be great again, and America will never back down, Trump said, announcing the nomination. The New York Times bestselling author Hegseth has frequently commented on military policy and suggested one of his first orders of business would be firing any generals who supported the Pentagon's diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. First of all, you've got to fire the chairman joint of the chiefs, and obviously going to bring in a new Secretary of Defense. But any general that was involved, general, admiral, whatever, that was involved in any of the DEI woke has got to go, Hegseth said during a recent interview on the Sean Ryan Show podcast. Either you're in for war fighting, and that's it. That's the only litmus test we care about. Hegseth had preemptively defended the move, saying that it would be a return to normalcy for soldiers rather than a MAGA takeover. While Hegseth had described countries like Russia and China as threats, he has framed the military's biggest threat as an internal one, arguing that wokeness divided the military internally and created an issue that adversaries can exploit. I think our biggest threat is internal. I think we are committing cultural self-deletion, and we've completely lost focus on the basics and building blocks of what made Western civilization in America exceptional, fruitful, prosperous, strong, free, Hegseth said on the podcast. Hegseth has proposed a wholesale purge of military officials who has supported DEI policies, urging a frontal assault right back at what's been done to this military from top to the bottom. The dumbest phrase on planet Earth in the military is "our diversity is our strength," Hegseth said on the podcast, arguing that uniformity between the soldiers is the key to the military's strength. Every time I hear a military leader say diversity is our strength, I throw up in my mouth a little bit more, because if they believe it, it shows you how sideways and how indoctrinated they are. While 17.5% of active duty military personnel are women, Hegseth has argued that the military leaders should acknowledge that their main constituency is strong, normal men, rebuffing efforts to diversify the ranks of the armed services. I wonder how many vets that are women and voted for this are happy about this right now. Yo, there aren't enough lesbians in San Francisco to staff the 82nd Airborne like you need. You need the boys in Kentucky and Texas and North Carolina and Wisconsin, Hegseth said on Tapson's podcast earlier this year. Hegseth was on the Take It Outside with Jay Cutler and Sam Mackey podcast and said that transgender soldiers are not deployable because they are reliant on chemicals, and suggested that women should not serve in certain combat roles. Everything about men and women serving together makes the situation more complicated, and complication in combat means casualties are worse. Hegseth said on Ryan's podcast, arguing that men are more capable in combat roles because of biological factors. An ardent defender of the president-elect, Hegseth has argued that the United States military under Trump was more effective by posing both uncertainty and the real threat of violence. At least under Trump, there were missiles falling on the terrorists' heads, Hegseth said on Man of War podcast with Rafa Kandi. They knew he meant business. Kim Jong-un, even though it didn't work out, knew Trump meant business. Fire and fury was a real thing. Uncertainty is a real thing. The real threat of violence is a real thing. And none of that exists under these globalists who think they can sanction their way. He has also criticized international institutions like the United Nations as a farce and a giant joke, while advocating a military policy that aims to end long-term conflicts through decisive action. We expect this clinically sanitized, no civilians casualties. Everything's going to be perfect. No one's going to get hurt. Everything. It's just not how war operates, and that's unfortunate. The way I heard it with Mike Rowe podcast. I'm sorry, he said that on The Way I Heard It with Mike Rowe. But if we try to do it with kid gloves or with surgical gloves, we're never really going to get rid of, actually exterminate the enemies that we need to defeat to create a peace on the other side. Woo! So he is ready to take women out, take anybody that's diverse out. You know what that means. Woo! He really said all this with his chest. I really do wonder what non-white soldiers who voted for Trump think about this. How women who are in the military think about this that voted for Trump. He said with his whole chest, anybody who thinks that we should be inclusive needs to be fired. People that have worked their way through the ranks. This is wild to me, but this is what America voted for. Tammy Duckworth has some things to say about women in combat, saying, "Where do you think I lost my legs?" Senator Tammy Duckworth criticized President-elect Trump's nomination of Fox News host Pete Hegseth as defense secretary after he called for women to not serve in combat roles. "Where do you think I lost my legs?" Duckworth told CNN Caitlin Collins in an interview on Wednesday. Duckworth, an Iraq war veteran and Purple Heart recipient, was among some of the first women to fly combat missions as a U.S. Army helicopter pilot. Her helicopter was hit by a grenade in 2004. She lost both legs and some mobility in her right arm. We've already gone over this with the other article. Look, he's not qualified to serve as Secretary of Defense. And obviously, he's made these comments about how he doesn't think women should be in combat and that he wants to be able to fire the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Duckworth said in an interview Wednesday, highlighted by Mediate. I asked him, how does that strengthen our nation's military? We can't go to war today without our women military members, she said, noting that there are more than 225,000 active duty women serving in the military right now. Trump is forging ahead with his dramatic shakeup of the military, even as concerns grow over what Hegseth will bring to the administration. His proposals for the Pentagon include promises to slash spending, thin top ranks, and roll back efforts to make the military more inclusive to transgender and women soldiers. So that's that. I wonder how many people are going to, go for this nomination or push back. Let me know what you think. Don't forget to like, comment, and share. It's going to be wild if Trump actually does close the Department of Education and the implications of the people that this impacts, from the teachers to the administration to the students to the parents. People really don't know what they voted for. The Department of Education provides about 10% of K-12 funding, enforces civil rights laws, and runs the $1.6 trillion student loan program. President-elect Donald Trump has promised sweeping changes to federal agencies, but there's one he wants to do away with altogether: the Department of Education. Closing the department, and off and on Republican goals since it was created in 1979, would require congressional approval, and it's unlikely Trump would have sufficient support. But Trump has made this promise often, and many Republicans are with him, arguing that the department is unnecessary, ineffective, and a tool of a woke culture war. Here's what to know. What does the department do? Trump has repeatedly promised to return responsibility for education to the states. In fact, education has long been the responsibility of state and local governments, which provide 90% of the funding and set most of the rules. The department does not dictate curriculum or have a hand in most school policies. But the federal agency plays an important role. It administers federal grant programs, including the $18.4 billion Title I program that provides supplemental funding to high-poverty K-12 schools, as well as the $15.5 billion program that covers the cost of education for students with disabilities. The department oversees the $1.6 trillion federal student loan program and sets rules for what colleges must do to participate. Now, it provides money for impoverished schools and for schools with students with disabilities. Is that going to impact any of these red states that voted against their own interests? And federal student loans. This is a mess. It also runs achievement tests dubbed the nation's report card and collects statistics on enrollment, crime in schools, staffing, and other topics. And the agency is charged with enforcing civil rights laws that bar discrimination in federally funded schools on the basis of race, sex, and other factors. The Biden administration has used that power, for instance, to prohibit schools from discriminating against students on the basis of gender identity. Trump could do the same in the opposite direction, perhaps barring schools from allowing trans girls and women to compete on sports teams. He's also said that he's going to look at any schools that have used equity as a tool to allow students to come into the school, and he's going to try to pull endowments and use those endowments as restitution, aka reparations for white people. excuse me, could Trump eliminate the agency? Trump cannot eliminate the agency on his own. Doing so would not only require congressional approval, but also a supermajority of 60 votes in the Senate, as long as its filibuster rules remain in place. Politically, this would be difficult, if not impossible, with the opposition from Democrats and probably some Republicans. A 2023 vote in the House to abolish the department, considered as an amendment to a parents' rights bill, failed. It garnered 161 yes votes, but 60 Republicans joined every Democrat in voting no. It's unclear whether Trump would choose to make this a priority and expend political capital to fight this battle on Capitol Hill. On the campaign trail, several GOP candidates also called for the closing of the agency, but some conservatives are urging Trump to jettison the idea and instead use the agency's powers to press conservative priorities. Betsy DeVos, who was the education secretary in Trump's first term, has said the administration tried to dismantle the department through budget cuts, but lawmakers mostly kept the spending intact. On the campaign trail, Trump promised to cut education spending in half, though it's not clear whether even a Republican-controlled Congress would go along with that. What are the implications of eliminating the Department of Education? Closing the education department would surely have symbolic impact. There would no longer be a member of the cabinet focused solely on education issues and empowered to speak to Americans about the challenges schools face. It would be harder for the federal government to elevate education issues or press for change in schools. Beyond that, the practical impact would depend on how Congress restructured the work of the department. Project 2025, the Heritage Foundation-led blueprint for a conservative administration, lays out a plan for assigning the agency's functions to other departments. For instance, the Treasury Department would take a strong hand in administrating the student loan program, and the Justice Department would enforce civil rights laws. I do want to remind us all that Trump and the Republicans said that Project 2025, that was not for Trump at all. It was not. The bigger impact would come if Congress also cut funding for education programs, which Project 2025 also recommends, or eliminated any of the department's central functions. Americans have mixed and partisan views on the education department, according to a 2024 survey conducted by the Pew Research Center. It found that 44% had favorable views of the agency and 45% had unfavorable views. But among Republicans and those who lean Republican, 64% viewed the agency unfavorably, compared with 26% of Democrats and those who lean Democratic. What would be the impact on borrowers and student debt? The Education Department runs $1.6 trillion student loan program, the single biggest mission of the agency. Theoretically, the federal government could drastically reduce the agency's role in student borrowing. More likely, another government or quasi-governmental agency would take on the responsibility if the agency was eliminated. Trump opposes Joe Biden's program to forgive student loan debt, and it seems clear he would reverse it regardless of whether the agency continues to exist. In 2023, Trump praised the Supreme Court for halting Biden's plan, saying it would have been very, very unfair to the millions and millions of people who have paid their debt through hard work. In March 2020, however, Trump waived interest and paused payments on all federal student loans to reduce the final burden on borrowers during the pandemic. The financial burden on borrowers during the pandemic. What has Trump said about the education department? Closing the education department is a central plank in Trump's school agenda and his Agenda 47 campaign platform. He criticized the agency as ineffective and bloated and said that many of its employees hate our children. Specifically, Trump has criticized the department's work under Democrats to promote racial equity and protect rights of transgender students, much of it through enforcement of civil rights laws. The agency, for instance, has said that sex discrimination includes discrimination against gender identity. During the campaign, Trump pledged to cut federal funding for any school or program pushing critical race theory, gender ideology, or other inappropriate racial, sexual, or political content on our children, to keep men out of women's sports, a reference to the debate including trans athletes and women's sports in schools, and to find and remove the radicals who have infiltrated the federal Department of Education. So that is what is going on with that. I'm glad to know that they do need a supermajority for that. And a lot of people, a lot of people would be impacted by cutting this agency. Even though they give 10% of the money to the states, it's still a big chunk, and it's going to impact impoverished states, which includes many red states, and students with disabilities. I know that they want to get rid of the woke, but that's still going to spite the people that actually voted for him. And if he does, those people deserve it. At this point, he could run the table with his Republicans and they will deserve it. Y'all join the conversation. Let me know what you think. Don't forget to like, comment, and share.